Surprised he's not getting another interview, at least as of right now, for the Browns head coaching job?
I'm surprised because at this juncture of the search, you kind of want to cast that wide net, right? And so, why not go and interview a Mike McCarthy and then just kind of put him in the mix with everybody else, unless they feel as though they've already gone down that path. They've already heard what they're going to hear. But it would always be a good thing, in my opinion, just kind of circle back and see what he thinks about this roster 5 years removed from the last time he interviewed.
Something important is happening in Cleveland, and it's not being said directly. When Emory Hunt talked about the Browns, he didn't criticize a player. He didn't attack Kevin Stefanski. He didn't hype Shedeur Sanders either. Instead, he pointed at the structure. Who actually controls the Browns' direction? Who decides the quarterback? And how much freedom does the next head coach really have? Those questions matter, because Shedeur Sanders' name is now connected to a situation that isn't clearly defined. The Browns have draft picks. They have flexibility. They have options. But Hunt made it clear, none of that matters until leadership roles stop overlapping, and when ownership, the front office, and the coaching staff aren't aligned. The quarterback usually pays the price. That's why Shedeur Sanders isn't just a prospect here. He's a test case, and what the Browns decide next will quietly tell the league everything.
A quarterback in Shedeur Sanders, that's the big elephant in the room. I think that's why people are being disingenuous about the Browns, because they're being disingenuous about their evaluation of Shedeur Sanders. You include him in that draft class, this guy got 7 weeks of first-team reps, and in those 7 weeks, with a worse-off roster than the guys that started the season with, they went 3-4. So imagine if he had gotten the entire offseason and started from week 1, maybe the Browns already would be a 9-win team, and we're talking about 2026, the potential opportunity for them to go really far in the playoffs.
Emory Hunt didn't raise his voice. He didn't accuse anyone directly, but the message landed hard. According to Hunt, the Cleveland Browns aren't stuck because of talent. They're stuck because of clarity. And that clarity starts at the top, before talking about quarterbacks, before debating draft strategy. Hunt made one thing clear. The Browns still don't fully know who's driving the franchise. Head coach, general manager, ownership. Those roles are supposed to work in a straight line. In Cleveland, Hunt suggests they overlap. That matters, because when roles overlap, decisions slow down. And when decisions slow down, players become collateral. Hunt explained that the Browns technically have everything a rebuilding team wants. Draft capital, cap flexibility, options in free agency, trade leverage. On paper, it's a strong position. But paper doesn't make decisions. People do. And right now, potential head coaches are quietly asking the same question. Who do I actually report to? Hunt pointed to league-wide examples where coaching hires fell apart not because of money or roster concerns, but because of power structure disagreements. Coaches with leverage want autonomy. They want to know the quarterback choice won't be overridden. They want assurance that ownership won't step in midstream. That's where Cleveland raises eyebrows. Not because Jimmy Haslam is active, many owners are, but because past decisions have created uncertainty about boundaries. Hunt didn't accuse Haslam of interference. He didn't single out Andrew Berry either. What he did say was more subtle and more damaging, that he suggested that candidates may worry about being outnumbered in the room. 2 voices versus 1. Long-term vision versus short-term pressure. Development versus urgency. That's not dysfunction, but it is hesitation, and hesitation is dangerous when a franchise is trying to reset. Hunt then tied this directly to the quarterback situation without naming names immediately. He said clarity under center cannot happen until the coaching structure is finalized. That sounds obvious, but it carries weight when you realize Cleveland is being linked to multiple quarterback paths at once. Veterans, bridge options, draft prospects. Too many paths usually means no clear direction. Hunt also noted something else that often gets overlooked. This is not considered a strong quarterback draft class.
Emory, how should the Browns attack the quarterback position this offseason?
Shedeur Sanders is the QB1 for the Cleveland Browns. And this is why I hated the whole discourse throughout the season, because everyone they put up new graphics and new splatter charts and all kind of colorful charts that show, oh, look what Shedeur Sanders rate. But they always leave out the fact that this dude got 7 weeks of starters reps, and he went 3-4 in those starts. And within those seven losses, 5 of those, they were in the ball game. So it's not like they were getting blown out. The Bears game was the only game where they were really outclassed. Even were in that San Francisco game before the score looked like it looked in the end. So if people, here's the thing. Everyone just hates on Shedeur Sanders because it's the cool thing to do. It's like hating on the Browns being the Browns, right? So looking at this team as a team that can be a very good team. So the fact that they had a guy, they got 7 weeks of starters reps with a roster that was injured on the offensive side of football, and they went 3-4 in those starts, won 2 of the last 3 games, 2 tough games, the teams that was trying to fight for the postseason, one being the rival. I mean, 2 being a rival, your Bengals and Steelers. I just don't see how you can not see the upside that, man, if we give this dude a full offseason and build around him with some receivers, stockpile at offensive line, some guys are going to come back healthy, this guy can get us to where we need to be and have us competitive. And it's funny how when you empower somebody, you get the best of that person. And when they empowered Shedeur, spoke life into him, you saw how he responded. And I think that's something that people that will never see because they don't want to see it, but the answer is right there in-house on a 5th-round rookie contract. So take full advantage before you have to break the bank. And your veteran is already on the roster too, and Deshaun Watson. So I think they are in a good spot to attack the draft and really bolster the offensive line, bolster the receiving core. You got great depth in the backfield, and Shedeur Sanders could be your guy. We saw that manifest itself out there on the field when he played in those 7 weeks.
There may be one name at the top, maybe, even that isn't locked in yet. That changes how aggressive a team should be. That if there's no clear franchise quarterback available, the smartest move might be patience. Trade back, build the roster, set the foundation, but patience requires alignment, and alignment is exactly what Hunt questioned. That he referenced how teams sometimes gamble on young coordinators, coaches without head coaching experience, not because they're sure bets, but because they believe they can mold them. That's where names like Grant Udinski quietly enter the conversation. Not flashy, not proven as a head coach, but potentially adaptable. Hunt explained that these hires often come from relationships. Someone vouches. Someone says, this guy is ready. And the list gets shorter. But again, that only works if the power structure supports the hire long-term. Otherwise, the young coach becomes a buffer, a shield, someone who absorbs blame when things stalled. That's when quarterbacks get rushed. That's when development timelines shorten. That's when expectations get misaligned. And that's where Shedeur Sanders starts to matter. Not because Hunt declared him the Browns' target. Not because anyone promised him anything. But because Hunt raised the exact question quarterbacks ask before entering unstable situations. Am I being chosen, or am I being used? Shedeur Sanders represents upside, confidence, marketability, but more importantly, he represents a decision point that if Cleveland moves toward a quarterback like him without first locking down leadership clarity, the league will notice, because history shows quarterbacks drafted into unclear power structures rarely win early and often take the blame. Hunt didn't say the Browns are broken. He said they're unresolved, and unresolved franchises don't just risk losing games, they risk losing trust. Timestamp 133-225. Why ownership influence and reporting lines scare off top coaching candidates. Emory Hunt never positioned Shedeur Sanders as a savior. That distinction matters. What Hunt did instead was frame Sanders as a variable, one that exposes how prepared a franchise actually is. Because quarterbacks don't just reflect talent evaluation, they reflect organizational discipline. Hunt's point was simple. Before a quarterback can succeed, the environment has to make sense. And right now, Cleveland's environment is still undefined.
Is there anyone that you would target to give Shedeur some help with, whether that is a wide receiver at number 6 overall that you love, or a lineman, or a free agent wide receiver, prospective trade wide receiver, something like that?
I think when you look at them picking at 6, right, and if you're trying to game the draft, I would try to see how bad the Cowboys want to move up, right, and try to get both of their first-round picks. They'll swap with the one of them and grab the other one and have 3 first-round picks. Because I feel like you got to go up front first. If you go interior offensive line tackle, I wouldn't mind doubling up on O-line in round 1. I think there's some very good wide receivers you can get early in round 2 with the Browns take or with the Browns pick, and they'll have some picks and chooses of guys that can help them out. They just need consistency at wide receiver, guys that can catch the ball. If you get that, man, I don't care where you get those guys from. But I do feel like the eliteness of the offensive line is yielding itself for you to take it early. And so I wouldn't mind doubling up, or even if you want to split O-line first, wide receiver second in the first round, go that route. But definitely those are 2 major needs that you want to address early. And if you could find a way to trade, acquire more talent, I mean, Andrew Barrett right now is cooking with gas. He got the Mario star right now in terms of draft picks based off last year's draft class. So give him more bites at the apple if you're able to find a trade partner down in that respect.
Hunt emphasized that this is not a draft cycle where teams are scrambling upward for elite quarterbacks. The class lacks weight at the top. There's no consensus, can't-miss prospect pulling front offices into reckless trades. That changes leverage. Teams with quarterback needs usually panic in these drafts. Cleveland doesn't appear to be panicking, but it also doesn't appear to be committed. That's where Sanders enters the conversation, not as an automatic pick, not as a guaranteed plan, but as a name that forces the Browns to decide what kind of franchise they want to be. Hunt talked about optionality. The Browns have it. They can trade back. They can explore veterans. They can sign competition. They can draft later. They can wait for a stronger class. But every option sends a signal that if Cleveland trades back, it says patience. If Cleveland reaches, it says urgency. If Cleveland brings in a veteran bridge, it says caution. And if Cleveland drafts a quarterback tied to ownership excitement or marketing appeal, it says something else entirely. Hunt stopped short of accusing anyone of pushing specific players. But he raised a question that NFL agents and coaches constantly ask: who's making this pick? Because quarterbacks feel the answer immediately that if a quarterback is chosen by a coach, development becomes collaborative. If he's chosen by a general manager, timelines are negotiated. If he's chosen by ownership, expectations accelerate. That's not speculation. That's league reality. Hunt explained that head coaches want control over the quarterback room. Not ego control, structural control. They want to set the system, the tempo, the progression timeline. When that control is blurred, the quarterback becomes a political piece. That's why Sanders' situation matters even before his name is called. He represents a fork in the road. Cleveland can align first, then choose a quarterback that fits, or choose first, then force alignment afterward. Hunt's commentary suggests that some candidates worry the Browns may be tempted by the second path. He also pointed out something subtle but important. Shedeur Sanders has already proven he can handle pressure. That's a positive. But NFL pressure is different. College pressure comes from expectations. NFL pressure comes from timelines. If Sanders enters a situation where the coach is still proving himself, the GM is defending past decisions, and ownership wants results fast, the margin for error disappears, and quarterbacks don't develop well with shrinking margins. Hunt made it clear that this isn't about Sanders' ability. It's about fit.is. Cleveland prepared to let a quarterback grow? Or does Cleveland need immediate validation? Those are 2 different plans. Hunt also hinted at why some coaches might hesitate to attach themselves to this job. Not because the roster is weak, but because the quarterback decision feels unfinished. Coaches want to know if they're inheriting a process or a verdict. If Sanders is drafted into a situation where the coach didn't choose him, the leash shortens for everyone. If Sanders struggles early, blame doesn't travel upward, it travels outward. To the player, to the staff, to the system. That's why Hunt's comments felt less like draft analysis and more like a warning. The Browns aren't deciding on Shedeur Sanders yet. They're deciding whether they're ready for a quarterback like him. And until that question is answered, every name connected to Cleveland will feel less like a plan and more like a placeholder. By the time Emory Hunt finished laying out the Browns situation, one thing became clear: this isn't about one decision. It's about how multiple decisions stack on top of each other. And at the center of that stack sit 3 forces: Kevin Stefanski's recent past, Andrew Berry's present authority, and ownership's long-term influence. Hunt didn't frame Stefanski as a failure. He framed him as a data point. A coach who had structure, a coach who had some success, a coach who still couldn't stabilize the quarterback position long-term. That matters because league observers don't just look at wins and losses. They look at patterns. In Cleveland, The pattern has been turnover without resolution. Hunt hinted that Stefanski's situation still lingers in how candidates and agents view the job. Not emotionally, structurally. If a coach with Stefanski's resume couldn't fully define the quarterback future, what does that say about the limits of the role? That question doesn't accuse anyone, but it does create caution. Andrew Berry's position complicates things further. Hunt was careful here. He didn't suggest Berry is disliked around the league. In fact, he implied the opposite, that Berry is generally respected, seen as smart and methodical. The issue isn't credibility. It's alignment. When a general manager has strong influence and the owner is closely involved, a head coach needs clear guardrails. Hunt suggested that some candidates might worry those guardrails aren't clearly marked. That doesn't mean chaos. It means hesitation. And hesitation slows everything down. Hunt pointed out that in today's NFL, top candidates often have options. They can stay coordinators. They can wait for cleaner situations. They don't need to jump at the first opening. So when a job raises questions about reporting structure, quarterback authority, and decision ownership, it quietly drops on the list. That's not a Browns-only problem, but it's a Browns-present one. This is where ownership perception becomes critical. Hunt referenced how owners shape franchises not just through decisions, but through reputation. Coaches talk, agents talk, executives talk, and once a perception sets in, it takes time to reverse. The Browns' perception right now isn't that ownership is reckless. It's that ownership is influential. There's a difference. Influential ownership can work when aligned. It struggles when roles blur. That's why Hunt's comments about quarterbacks landed harder than expected. He raised the concern that future coaches might wonder whether quarterback decisions are collaborative or predetermined, whether they'll be empowered to develop or expected to execute. That distinction shapes everything. If Cleveland brings in a young coach, that coach needs time. If Cleveland drafts a quarterback, that quarterback needs patience. If Cleveland wants results quickly, something has to give. Hunt implied that the Browns are still deciding which priority comes first. That's why Shedeur Sanders keeps coming up, even without being directly discussed, that he represents a high-visibility decision in a low-margin environment. Draft him too early, and expectations spike. Pass on him, and questions linger. Wait too long, and uncertainty drags into another season. None of those outcomes are disastrous, but none are clean either. Hunt closed his thinking by circling back to leadership unity, not agreement on every move, not silence behind closed doors, but shared vision. He suggested that the Browns' next major decision, whether coach, quarterback, or both, will signal to the league whether Cleveland has reached that point. Because when a franchise finally aligns, the noise drops. Mock drafts settle. Speculation fades. Until then, every move feels provisional. Kevin Stefanski's tenure showed that coaching alone isn't enough. Andrew Berry's role shows that planning alone isn't enough. Ownership influence shows that resources alone aren't enough. What Cleveland needs now is definition, and until that happens, any quarterback, including Shedeur Sanders, isn't walking into a rebuild, he's walking into a question mark.